Hello, thank you for joining me today. I am Jerrel. Today I will explain my approach to writing, specifically regarding interesting stories and dialogue that keeps the audience interested. This applies to storytelling in general and not specifically just video games or novels. I want to help you develop your storytelling skills, or if you aren't a writer and you're just interested in watching good stories. Hopefully this video will help you appreciate and identify why certain things just don't feel right in media and how certain stories just feel so great and they just seem to work and you're not exactly sure why. Hopefully this video will help you pinpoint the things that are interesting. So I will give a brief explanation of how your life experiences contribute to your ability to create. I will read an excerpt from my novel, Silver Falls Heavy Shadow, which ties into my Silver Falls game series across the Nintendo consoles. A number of my games you can play for free, some you can stream on your web browser so you can enjoy the characters and the stories, and other games you can pick up on the Nintendo Switch eShop. After the excerpt, I will share an explanation of the process behind writing that scene, and I will share my personal life experiences that contributed to the composition of that scene. The novel Heavy Shadow is free to read. You can read it right now, but it's still in draft form, and I'm not finished with it yet. But you can read chapters 1 through 18 for free, so I will put the link in the description, and you will find typos and some areas that require revision, so I'm still working on that, and when I have finished with my revisions, I will start selling paperback copies, but the digital version will always be free. So if you don't want to pick up the paperback, you can still read and enjoy the full version of the novel for free online. So all forms of art have many different approaches, but one thing is always true, and that art is the expression of ideas and feelings filtered through your life experiences. Now, if you find a TV show or a movie or a book or a video game is boring, then the person who created that art has had a boring life. There's no two ways around it. It means that they haven't learned much of anything of value from their life experiences. Contrary to that, if you find a piece of media that is interesting to you, more than likely the person who created that art has had a rich, eventful, interesting life, and they have learned lessons from their experiences. So what does this mean for you? If you want to create interesting art, stories, video games, character designs, you need to live a full, rich life, and you need to learn lessons from your experiences. So how do you do this? Go out and explore the world however you can. Meet new people who are different from you, and learn to understand them and see eye to eye. You need to face difficult challenges head on and become stronger by finding new ways to forge ahead without losing sight of who you are and what you believe in. Life is an adventure, and you only have a limited amount of time to experience that adventure. This is not something that you will find by playing on Twitter all day long. You have to spend time out in the real world to gain life experiences so that you can have something of value to bring to other people. So let's get started on reading an excerpt from my novel Silver Falls Heavy Shadows, but let's go ahead and start a campfire. And because of that, I think we should keep our camping equipment on hand. If you would like to toast some marshmallows, go ahead and grab your skewers or your marshmallow toasters, get those ready. If you are cold, please let me know. I will hand out these survival blankets. They may make an interesting crinkly noise, but they can keep you warm. And lastly, if you do get afraid of the dark, I will be handing out flashlights. Please let me know ahead of time if you do require a flashlight. Okay, let's read an excerpt from Silver Falls Heavy Shadow, Chapter 5. Dodger and Karn inched their way up to the bar, led by the scent of recently waxed leather and cinnamon. The walls of the interior were covered with so much climbing and mountaineering gear, there was barely space left to hang up a postage stamp. Hanging from the ceiling were old sleds, trophy antlers, taxidermied animals, all kinds of antique bows and arrows, and animal traps. A serious-looking man in his late 20s, with blue eyes as sharp as an arrow's broadhead tip, and hair the color of a sunrise, turned his head and nodded at Dodger and Karn from the other side of the bar. Held tightly between his two hands was a bright red apple. As he clenched his teeth and gripped tightly, the muscles of his forearms and shoulders bulged so intensely that it seemed the threads of his green plaid shirt were right on the verge of tearing apart. "Be with you in a sec," he said to Dodger. All eyes fell back to the bartender, who gripped the apple tighter and tighter with his two hands. With a sudden echoing pop, the apple snapped in two perfect halves along a split that looked to have been made by the sharpest of knives. The men sitting side by side slammed their hands down onto the surface of the bar, cheering and cursing out with shock and disbelief. "Holy shit. No goddamn way. I don't believe that shit. How in holy hell did you do that? See, I told you he could do it." "All right there, I did it. Pay up." The bartender broke the apple halves into quarters before setting them into glasses and pouring in some European apple cider from the bar tap. Each man sitting at the bar shook his head and set down a $5 bill, which the bartender collected nonchalantly. "Shit. Hell of a grip," Dodger said as the bartender walked back over to him. "No big deal. What can I get you fellas?" The bartender's voice was dry, as if playing a tired old recording. He sounded years older than he looked. "Hurricane Light, please," Dodger answered, looking over to Karn with agreement. Karn could tell Dodger came here for some reason and didn't intend on staying too long. "You want me to open a tab, or do you want to pony up now?" The bartender got straight to pouring the drinks, not even making eye contact. Dodger could feel the heat from the regulars of the bar staring him down. "Tab's fine," Dodger answered, trying to not look back at the other guys watching him. Over an old muffled jukebox, doo-wop music from the 50s began to play softly. "Oh, hey, I love this song. You Don't Belong Here, by Johnny and the Star Rockets, from 1957, I think." Karn beamed with a smile as he turned around to locate the source of the music. He noticed a worn but well-maintained pool table in the middle of the room, a cast-iron fireplace in the far corner, and an arcade machine from the 90s tucked away in another corner. The bartender handed Dodger and Karn their drinks without paying much more attention to them. When he turned around, Dodger noticed a metal slingshot sitting in the bartender's rear pocket, a sight Dodger hadn't seen since the 90s. As the bartender disappeared into the back room, the chatter of the other bar patrons slowly picked up where it had left off. Instead of clinking their glasses together, Dodger and Karn quietly sipped their drinks as they sat uncomfortably at the bar. "What's the deal with this place?" Dodger asked. Karn started to answer. "I don't know, man. These guys look like they're staring at your nuts. Here you go." The bartender set down 2 bowls of mixed peanuts, pretzels, and trail mix in front of Dodger and Karn, giving them a slight nod. "Thanks. Hey, we didn't barge in on some kind of private event here, did we?" Dodger asked, finally making eye contact with the bartender. "No." "Why? Are you guys from down the mountain?" "I've never seen you around here before." The bartender answered while mixing a drink for a man who had just signaled him from farther down the bar. "I feel like a marching band that just showed up at a funeral." Dodger hid behind his beer while looking up at an antique clock sitting up above the rear wall. "Huh? Oh, don't mind them fellas. They probably think you're with that out-of-town weirdo who's been up here the past couple of weeks. Let them know you're local and they'll be fine," the bartender said with reassurance. "Out-of-town weirdo? Can you tell me about it?" Dodger leaned in over the bar, lowering his voice. "Yeah, sure. He's got this long, dark, stringy hair, looks unwashed, wears a purple baseball cap. Said his name's Val or Valentine or something. He's been asking people about his sister who was working with a logging crew like 28 years ago or something. Said she went missing, but honestly, I can't imagine a woman working in a logging crew back then. It just didn't happen," the bartender answered. A somewhat thin older man with drowsy eyes beneath wild white eyebrows, big, thick frame, perfectly round glasses, and a bushy mustache that stuck out like a bird beak, hopped off his chair and wobbled over to the bartender and Dodger talking. He put his arm on the bar to steady himself as he leaned in close to Dodger. "Hey, the other fellas and I were just talking. You're Dodger Rogers, aren't you?" The old man spoke with a creaking voice. "Yeah, who's asking?" Dodger leaned back to get a good look at the old man and size up the other men in the bar, as if calculating his chances of him and Karn winning a bar fight. "Shit, I thought I recognized you. You're the guy who never loses a game of pool, darts, or horseshoes. What are you doing up here in our little bar?" The little old man's joints creaked with excitement. "Actually, I'm looking for a guy named Iron Austin. I heard he usually has a drink here. I was hoping to have a chat with him," Dodger said, taking a big swig of his drink. "Now, Iron likes to keep to himself. He doesn't really like talking to folks," the old man said. "Dodger's interested in buying and working Golden Ridge Ranch." Karn leaned in with his beer. Dodger looked at him with wide eyes, trying to figure out why Karn would say something like that. "Oh, well, if that's the case, Iron might want to hear from you then. He's been looking for someone with the right head on his shoulders to pick up that old place and properly take care of it. Go on to the far end of the bar. That fellow with the overalls and long beard is Iron. Tell him Owell told you to talk to him," the little old man said, changing his tune. Owell grabbed his mixed drink from the bartender and wobbled his way back to his seat, laughing at a joke that he had just missed from one of the other guys sitting at the bar. Dodger exchanged a look with Karn as the song First to Shoot, Last to Die by the Wranglers started playing over the jukebox. He got to his feet and slowly made his way to the other side of the room. With each footstep, the floorboards creaked ever louder, and his heart punched against his chest ever harder. What should he say to Iron? How should he start the conversation? Karn pulled his sleeve back and checked the time on his watch as Dodger made his way toward Iron. Dodger found a large figure hunched over in the farthest bar stool in the bar, intermittently taking huge bites out of his beer glass with a face that even the coldest winter wind was afraid to brush up against. Beneath an old cowboy hat, two smoldering embers of eyes rested warily, hiding a long, faded gray beard that looked as hard as metal. "Hey, the name's Dodger. Are you Iron?" Dodger struggled to step up onto the bar stool, suddenly feeling like a small child trying to climb up into a high chair. "What do you want?" A deep, heavy voice spoke, rumbling the glass in Dodger's increasingly sweaty hand. "I was hoping I could ask you about Golden Ridge Ranch," Dodger said sheepishly, hiding behind his drink. "Well, I don't feel like talking." Iron poured the rest of his half-empty glass down his throat in one gulp. After a moment of awkward silence, broken only by the other guys in the bar whispering and mentioning Dodger's name, Iron pushed his glass forward across the bar and called out with a booming voice, "Atticus, Dodger here is buying a shot of Honey Thunder for everyone." "So generous," Atticus, the bartender, answered back with the driest of tones. The other guys at the bar sputtered comments of surprise and cheered Dodger's name. As Atticus grabbed handfuls of shot glasses and poured out thick, amber liquid, Dodger looked at the stony muscles of Iron's forearms, wondering what it would feel like to get punched out by a man nearly the size of a semi-truck cab. Owell told me to talk to you," Dodger said, his voice barely audible over the joyous uproar of the other guys. "All right then, talk," Iron grunted. I wanted to ask if you know anything about those rumors about Golden Ridge Ranch. You know, weird animals, lights in the night sky, that kind of thing." Dodger raised his voice, trying to sound tough, but the other guys in the bar drowned out his voice by slapping their hands down onto the counter while cheering on Atticus. "Yeah, well, I'd like my wife to take a break from being a grade-A bitch, but you don't see me holding out my hand for wishes," Iron lamented, his deep voice cutting through the riotous sound of the bar. Atticus finished filling the nearly dozen shot glasses and lined them up on a wooden board sitting on the back of the bar. A friend of mine said he saw you having a talk with Bull Brandish. I was wondering if he said anything to you about them weird lights in the sky folks in town have been talking about. Dodger raised his voice, but by that point, Atticus had his hand on a thick rope hanging in the corner of the room, ringing a bell with a sound that surely must have been audible for at least a mile away. With a dramatic flick of his wrist, Atticus slammed a big red button labeled Storm Warning. The lights dimmed and a strobe light flashed out, heralding the sound of booming thunder and heavy wind over a loudspeaker. As the darkness took hold of the room, the strobe light flashed. Iron slowly stepped off his bar stool and stood up. Dodger watched in slow motion as Iron rose higher and higher, until Iron's face loomed far above, glaring down at Dodger like the head of a storm cloud. Iron's eyes flashed like lightning above the turbulent tempest of his beard. His muscle-bound shoulders stretched on like mountains on the horizon. Atticus carried the wooden board to the front of the bar, handing out the shot glasses to the men who were out of their seats, hootin' and hollerin' at the light show. With drinks in hand, all the men cried out, 3, 2, 1. With that, the men downed the premium price shot of liquor as the sound effect of thunder and storm roared to a crescendo. All the men, except Dodger and Iron, who were locked in a stare-down, seeing who would make the next move. "I'll answer your questions," Iron spoke firmly as he reached across the bar and grabbed 2 shot glasses with one hand. He pushed his fist forward, dropping one of the glasses into Dodger's hand. "Hey, Dodger, come talk to my new friend Owell. He can do this cool trick with 2 forks and a toothpick." Karn hopped excitedly over to Dodger, dragging along Owell with their arms around each other's shoulders. Dodger couldn't bring himself to break eye contact with Iron. "I'll answer whatever you want to know. But first you play me 1 round of pool. You win, I'll talk," Iron grunted, squinting hard. He and Dodger nodded as they simultaneously downed their shot of Honey Thunder, breaking eye contact for the first time since the storm had started. The sound effects faded away, leaving the easy calm of chatting men in the bar and the feeling of smoldering fire in Dodger's stomach. So I'd like to explain my approach in writing this scene. It's important when you write any scene, whether it's a video game, movie, TV, a novel, you need to consider what is the point of the scene. How does it contribute to the overall story? In this scene, Dodger needs to gain information, and Karn is there to help him. So, what makes this interesting is what is stopping the character from achieving their goals? How do the characters solve the problem of not being able to achieve their goal? So outside of that basic mechanical function, the story must also function on a subconscious and emotional level as well. The events that occur in this scene, they continue to escalate as the scene progresses. The environment starts with establishing information so the audience understands where they are and what is happening. And the events escalate to a point where things start to feel increasingly out of the protagonist's control. The viewer is left to wonder, how is the protagonist supposed to deal with this situation? And this is what allows the audience to be engaged and be part of the story process. Strong, effective storytelling is a two-way street, which means that the viewer, the audience, gets to be a part of that. At this point, the audience is familiar with the personality, strengths, and weaknesses of the protagonists, of the characters Dodger and Karn, and that should be true for any story. The audience expects these characters to behave a certain way. They know what their limitations and what their capabilities are. What builds tension and excitement is that the audience understands the limitations and capabilities of a character. I'm sure you've seen recently in media stories and characters that just lack that excitement and engagement and tension, and much of that has to do with these characters having seemingly unlimited capabilities and inexplicably no limitations. And that means that it's just not interesting because the audience needs to know what these characters can do and cannot do. And that is what opens up the two-way street for people to get engaged and to understand what should be possible in the story. This is what builds tension and excitement. The language used in this excerpt in certain cases is not literal. it focuses on conveyance. How do you want the audience to feel? I will read the line. Iron's eyes flashed like lightning above the turbulent tempest of his beard. His muscle-bound shoulders stretched on like mountains on the horizon. One might complain that this isn't realistic. We know that his beard is not a tempest. We know his shoulders are not mountains. This is an example of using imagery to express a feeling and an idea. A weak way to express this idea would be to say, Iron was huge and really, really strong. It's basically saying the same thing, but it's really crappy, isn't it? It is up to you as an artist to decide whether you want to be a weak artist or a strong one. Now, I want to also share a little bit of how this storytelling connects to the Silver Falls games. The characters that appear in this scene that I've shared with you actually come from the Silver Falls games. My approach to the Silver Falls storytelling is people explore the games and their stories in their own order. People can play the games in any order, and it influences their connection to the characters and their perspective of different events that occur. It is very exciting to be introduced to these characters in the story when you have already met these characters and have spent time with them by playing their games. For example, one of my most popular games that people tell me is one of their favorites is Silver Falls Ghoul Busters. This story takes place in the 90s, and thus the visual aesthetic matches that of Game Boy games from the 90s. You play as two characters. One of those characters is Atticus Longdraw. In the excerpt that I read you, Atticus is present, but his name is not given to the reader. It is actually held off for a significant amount of time during the events, and the name of Atticus is only revealed after details of the character have been explained. So in this situation, this is an interesting way to tell a story, because the last time that people have seen Atticus the character, he was just a little kid, and his primary form of gameplay was using a slingshot. Through this scene, I give the reader hints of who this character is, and once it mentions the slingshot in his back pocket, that really starts cementing the clues, and it brings things together, and people might start thinking, wait a second, well, I only know one other Silver Falls character that's ever used a slingshot. And once the reveal is dropped that this is Atticus, it's extremely satisfying for people who know the character Atticus, but the last time they saw him was, maybe 20 years ago. So that is effective storytelling that functions not just on a mechanical level, but on an emotional level, and it rewards the audience. It rewards the viewer for having spent time in this world already. Next, I want to share some of my personal experiences that contributed to this scene. So here's where things get a little casual, and we can just have some fun and chat. So, to create really interesting stories and interesting ideas and concepts, it's important to use your life experiences. And I don't mean, take something that happened to you and just copy and paste it. I mean to take the feeling, the sensation, the thought that you've experienced through different events in your lives and apply those and share those with your audience. The idea of Atticus splitting the apple is something that I actually did as a teenager. I eventually, during high school, I started doing body conditioning, and I took that very seriously, and I still do take that very seriously. But I haven't tried to split an apple recently. But in the past, as a teenager, one might say I bulked up a little bit towards my late teens, and I realized, hey, if I sort of approach this situation a certain way, I could actually split an apple in half with my bare hands. And as a kid, you kind of think, what I thought was one day I'll grow up and I'll hang out at these cool saloons, and I'll bet people $5 that I can split an apple. And then my teenage brain thought that I was going to earn money that way. It's funny, isn't it? And so I took that idea and I thought, how can I apply this into a story? And the purpose of that it's such a small, it feels inconsequential, but what it is explaining to the audience is it is showing the character of Atticus is not only sort of resourceful when it comes to sort of earning money in certain ways, but it shows that he's a little bit cheeky. There is sort of a youthful exuberance to him, despite the fact that the story explains him as being quite serious. There is that sort of youthful exuberance to him, and it also says, holy shit, this guy's pretty strong. And that is something that I want to tie into these characters that you as a player have spent time with. You went on a journey with Atticus already when you played Ghoulbusters, and so you would think, well, he's got to be really strong, right? If he can survive fighting a bunch of monsters, he's got to be pretty strong. This is an organic way, and it is a fun way of saying, this dude's really strong, and you should know it because you went through a journey with him. You went on an adventure with him. So that is an example of taking one of my life experiences and applying it in an interesting way. Next, I want to explain the situation with Honey Thunder, where he rings the bell, he hits the alarm, there's flashing lights. So years ago, maybe eight or so years ago, and I want to preface this by saying that I don't condone, the abuse of alcohol, heavy drinking. For anyone out there, please drink responsibly, and if you are out having fun and partying, always make sure that you are with someone who has your best interest, who has your back. Make sure you have a safe designated driver. Please be careful out there. So, years ago, this occurred at a saloon called Diamond Jim's in California, Highway 108, and it is near Miwok Village, also near, not far from Twain Harte. So, if I'm not sitting in my office working, then I am out there going on adventures, living life, meeting people, making friends, and just going on adventures. And years ago in California, I landed at a saloon called Diamond Jim's with a good buddy of mine, and we were hanging out with the locals. We were sharing drinks. We weren't going crazy, but at some point, a fella named Crutch, and he was with a lady named Linda, and I remember them, Crutch and Linda. And we were hanging out with Crutch and Linda for much of the night. And I remember them because Crutch and Linda kept saying, we're not together, we're not a couple, we're just best friends. But they were holding hands the whole night. I am telling you, they were more than just friends. I'm telling you that. They were much more than friends. So Crutch works in military, in the Navy. And you get to, in those environments, your masculine sides come out, and you tend to, there is a sense of bravado and machismo, and you're sort of, yeah, this and that. So Crutch, we're hanging out, we're having a fun time, and he signals to the bartender, and he says, Fireball. And I'm sitting there, I'm not a big drinker, I've never had Fireball. They bring out this long plank, and I think there's shot glasses that are glued to this board. And they're pouring Fireball and out of there. We're setting that there at the bar. Maybe there's a handful of us, 8, 10 sitting there. And Crutch says, all right, we'll sit some Fireball. So I'm sitting there with my buddy, Vietnam War vet, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh shit, well, I'm not, this isn't what I like to do. I'm not interested in doing shots, but you're wrapped up in the moment. You're hanging out with these people. You're already having so much fun. So we're sitting at the bar, and everyone's sort of like pounding on the bar, and they're cheering, and the other patrons are sort of cheering on, and we're sitting there, and then this long plank, and we're sitting there, and then we all line up, and they tilt it back, and we all take the shot at the exact same time, and everyone's hooting and hollering, and they're cheering, and I'm thinking, this is cool. This is so much fun. I never thought that I would see myself in a situation like that. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember if we did that a second time. I kind of think we did. So we were responsible. We did rent out a motel room nearby. So we didn't drive home that night. So we were responsible. But I just remember that. And I remember thinking, like, that is wild. I never thought I would end up in a sort of a fun situation like that, just hanging out with strangers and making friends. And that always stuck with me. And so it was that life experience, the feeling that I experienced there. And I wanted to translate that experience into a story, and how do I share that feeling? So you can see it wasn't an exact copy, and it's a very weak approach to just copy and paste something you've experienced from your life. But if you can take the feeling of it and share the feeling with other people, that is a very effective approach, and it's what makes things feel genuine. It makes it feel like something that could actually happen, and people are willing to believe that as an audience. So I just wanted to share that with you. And if you would like to read Silver Falls Heavy Shadow, please feel free to check that out. It's totally free. Again, there's going to be quite a few typos, as this is the rough draft that you'll be seeing online, but please feel free to read that. There are 18 chapters for you to enjoy. If you do enjoy that, please check out Silver Falls Ghoul Busters on the Nintendo Switch eShop, because it does tie directly into the novel. And also my Game Boy Color game, Silver Falls Galaxy Bound Curse, that actually also ties directly into Heavy Shadow. And Heavy Shadow, in a way, is a kind of sequel to Galaxy Bound Curse. It's totally free to download and play. I'll put the link in the description below. Take care of yourselves, be well, and remember, life is an adventure, so get out there and live. Hope you enjoyed that, and again, a very special thanks to the Patreon supporters, especially the new supporters on Patreon. I will be adding a new tier, as has been requested, so I'll be adding a $1 tier in the next day or two, so I just want to thank all of you for supporting me. I'll do my best to keep bringing you content that hopefully is just either interesting or fun. Take care of yourselves, everyone, and yeah, if you'd like to check out some of my games on Nintendo Switch eShop, you can see some here. Take care.